All right, welcome to the Explainer. Have you ever stopped to think about something that feels, well, almost like magic? How in the world do we teach a machine, a hunk of silicon and wires, to do something as deeply human as seeing? It's a huge question, and it all boils down to a really simple but massive disconnect.
So check this out. When you look at a picture of a face, your brain just gets it, instantly. But a computer, it sees a giant grid of numbers. That's it. Just a bunch of values for red, green, and blue for every single pixel. It's totally meaningless data to a machine. So the entire challenge, the whole puzzle of computer vision, is figuring out how to bridge that gap. How do we get a computer from that sea of numbers to something as simple as, hey, that's a face? Okay, so how do you even begin to teach a machine to spot patterns in millions of pixels? I mean, to actually see a cat or a car or a face in that ocean of data? Well, the very first idea was kind of what you'd expect. Just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah, the first, most obvious thought was to use what's called a standard artificial neural network. The logic is, it sounds simple enough, right? You just take every single pixel from the image and connect it to every single neuron in your network's first layer. Just let the machine figure it out. It's the definition of a brute force approach. And spoiler alert, it turned out to be a really, really bad idea.
And here's why. This brute force method, it just falls apart almost immediately. It runs into these huge, deal-breaking problems. It sounds so simple on paper, but in the real world, it's an absolute computational nightmare, and honestly, it's just not very intelligent.
Let me break down the core difference here, because it's a big one. A standard network, it just connects everything to everything else. It's a total free-for-all, just a mess of connections. But a convolutional network, the smarter approach, it's way more disciplined. It only looks at small, local patches of pixels at a time, and this is the killer feature. It reuses the same connections, the same little feature detectors all over the image. It's about working smarter, not harder.
So, this leads to problem number one, an absolutely insane number of connections. You can think of every single connection as a little knob that the network has to learn how to tune just right. We call these parameters. Now get this, for a standard network to process even a small color image, just the first layer would need over 150 million of these little knobs to learn. That's not just a problem, that's a computational disaster. It's way too big, way too slow, and just unbelievably inefficient.
But honestly, the size isn't even the biggest flaw. It's about intelligence, or the complete lack of it. The brute force network has absolutely zero concept of space. You could literally take an image, scramble all the pixels up like you're shuffling a deck of cards, and it wouldn't even know the difference. It has to learn from scratch that pixels that are next to each other might be related. It completely misses the entire point of what an image is. So yeah, this approach wasn't just inefficient, it was a total dead end.
So if brute force is a bust, then what's the answer? Well, the breakthrough, the big aha moment, came from looking at the single best vision system we know of, the human brain. Researchers started asking a different question. Okay, forget the computers for a second. How do we see?
And it turns out, research into our own visual cortex revealed this incredibly elegant strategy. See, our brains don't try to process a whole scene all at once. Nope. Instead, specialized neurons act like tiny little feature detectors. They're only looking for really simple things in small areas, like a vertical line here, or a little diagonal edge there, or a patch of a certain color. It's only after that first pass that these simple features get passed along and combined into more complex ideas like corners or curves, and then eventually those get combined into things like an eye or a nose. It's a hierarchy, building from simple to complex. And this was the exact blueprint the machines needed. This insight from biology was everything. It was the key that unlocked the whole problem. It inspired a totally new kind of network architecture, the convolutional neural network, or CNN for short. And instead of that chaotic, connect everything to everything mess, the CNN was designed to mimic the brain's much smarter, local-first strategy for seeing. So, how does a CNN actually do this? How does it work? Well, let's think of it like a detective trying to solve the mystery of an image. It doesn't just wander around aimlessly. It uses three really powerful techniques. We can even call them its three superpowers to crack the case piece by piece. Okay, superpower number one. Instead of trying to look at the entire image all at once, the network uses a small filter. It's called a kernel to scan just a tiny patch of pixels at a time. Think of this kernel as our detective's magnifying glass, and it's trained to spot just one specific clue, maybe a vertical edge. This idea of focusing on small, local areas is called sparse interactions, and it just massively cuts down on the amount of work the network has to do.
Now for the second superpower, and this is where things get really clever. It's called parameter sharing. Think about it. Why would you teach the network how to find a vertical edge in the top left corner and then have to teach it all over again from scratch to find a vertical edge in the top right? It makes no sense. A CNN doesn't do that. It learns one perfect vertical edge detector, that's our kernel, and then it just slides that same detective, across the entire image. This massive reuse of a single learned pattern, this is the secret sauce. This is what makes CNNs so unbelievably efficient.
And finally, superpower number 3 is something called pooling. So after our detective has scanned a local area for clues, they don't write down every single tiny detail. Instead, they just file a quick summary report. They basically say, hey, the most important thing I found in this little area was this. This makes the network way more robust. It starts to care more that an eye is present on the left side of a face, not about its exact pixel coordinates. This is called invariance, and it's actually a lot like how our own vision works. We don't need things to be in the exact same spot to recognize them.
Okay, so we've got our 3 superpowers, right? Looking locally, reusing the same detector, and then summarizing the findings. So how do these all work together to get us from a bunch of pixels to an actual recognizable face? Well, it all happens in layers.
It builds up in a hierarchy, just like we talked about with the brain. First, you feed the image into layer 1. Its little detectors are only looking for the simplest stuff, basic edges, lines, maybe some color gradients. Then, the output of that layer gets passed on. The next layer doesn't even see the original pixels anymore. It sees the edges and lines from the first layer, and it starts to combine them into slightly more complex shapes like curves and corners. Then you go deeper still. The next layer combines those curves and corners into recognizable parts. Hey, that looks like an eye. That's a nose. That's a mouth. And then finally, the very last layer looks at this whole collection of parts and it makes the final call. Yep, face detected.
And look, this whole elegant, brain-inspired design, it wasn't just a neat little trick. It was the key that unlocked the entire modern AI revolution. By finally teaching machines how to see in an intelligent way, CNNs completely changed the game for what technology is capable of.
And I'm not talking about science fiction here. This is technology that's in your pocket right now and on our roads. CNNs are the reason self-driving cars can see pedestrians. They're helping doctors analyze medical scans to spot diseases earlier than ever. They are probably organizing your photo library as we speak, and yep, you guessed it, they're the reason you can unlock your phone just by looking at it.
So this incredible journey from a totally meaningless grid of numbers to actual meaningful sight has given our machines a powerful new sense. And it really leaves us with a pretty big question to think about, doesn't it? Now that our creations can actually see the world, what new wonders are they going to help us discover? What are the next big problems they're going to help us solve?